We've just heard quite a significant report that a city called Misrata, which is not too far from the capital, Tripoli, has now fallen to the hands of the uprising, let's call it. And that's significant because it's the first time we've heard of a significant loss for the regime in the western part of Libya. So far, the action has really been mostly in the east. Benghazi, which is Libya's second city, is now the center of quite a large area that is being described as liberated. And it was always said when the unrest began in Libya that, okay, whatever happened in the east would be important, but what really mattered was Tripoli and the west. And the signs are now, of course, we've seen a lot of reports of fighting and serious repression of unrest in Tripoli. But now the fall of Misrata suggests that the west of Libya is starting to be seriously affected. Gaddafi's speech was, I think everybody who saw it would agree, was of a man who looked pretty desperate. He was ranting and raving, barking out his anger at the ungrateful people who had had the temerity, rats, he called them, to rise up against him. He, after all, was no more than the humble leader of the revolution. He had no power himself, and he called on his supporters to come out and to fight these agents of America and agents of Al-Qaeda. And it really was a pretty insane sort of performance. But I think underlying it was the sense of desperation that after 41 years in power, he's not going to go down without a fight. There was no sign of his will weakening. He was very, very defiant. And people, I think, found it a frightening performance that suggests that however this Libyan drama ends, there's likely to be quite a lot of blood. Also, in the last few hours, we've seen some quite significant defections from the regime. A man called Abdel Fattah Yunus al-Obeidi, who was Gaddafi's interior minister, in effect, and very much an old comrade from the days of the revolution, a loyalist, announced that he was throwing in his lot with the opposition movement and in fact called on the army to join in. So I think that's a very significant loss from what until very recently looked like the very hard core of the regime. We have Gaddafi and his own family. Famously has these 7 sons, each with different position and some quite wacky personalities too. But we saw Saif al-Islam, perhaps the most important of the sons, also a couple of days ago, wagging his finger, promising reforms, but also sounding very, very defiant. It's hard to imagine anywhere abroad that Gaddafi could now go. He had a lot of blood on his hands before the uprising began, but hundreds of people, by conservative estimate, have been killed in the last few days alone. It's hard to imagine many countries, or really any country, that would give him refuge. And he said himself in his speech that he would die a martyr on Libyan soil. It's hard to see him following the route of the Tunisian president, Ben Ali, who fled to a gilded exile in Saudi Arabia. And there isn't an option for Gaddafi like the Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak, who may well now end his days living in luxury and seclusion in his villa in Sharm el-Sheikh. I think Gaddafi will not leave Libya, and I think it's hard to imagine a peaceful outcome to this crisis.